Finally.
We're back.
Okay. What's up, buddy?
How you doing?
Woo! These days, man. These days. And
Any
now
progress?
this whole, let's see. Okay. Oh, sweet. The little tripod works.
Good,
Excellent.
good, good.
Sweet.
Any progress with those deals?
There was, and that's why, uh, we were negotiating a couple offers and there were requests to see the place and I was just sending people through and luckily we did that because there was some interest still. So I very well could have been like, oh, we're
It's a
kind of tied
it's
up
a
at the
wrap.
moment or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
So maybe something pans out, but I think the plan is now you drop it, you know, 15 grand or something like that, host an open house, see if you can get some new folks in. Because there are, I mean, as the May and June months come, we know that that's peak season for
Yeah.
everybody looking.
Right,
So,
right.
so you have that. And yeah, I just went to Waltham place, or sorry, Woburn place that I had sold in the past to go scope it out. It was currently being rented. Those people were very sweet, but they were telling me about their own journey of buying a place in February when there was four homes in any given town on at any given time.
Right.
So, um, yeah, yeah, man.
I mean, that
Let's go.
that kind of lends to our topic for today, doesn't it? That
Exactly.
uh, because of because of the limited supply and continuously rising prices, um, or at least buoyed prices, like despite what's
Hmm.
going on with the economy and things like that. Um, we thought it would be timely and helpful to cover the whole topic of buying with somebody else. I mean, it could be a friend, could be like a roommate situation. It could be,
Yep.
buy with a girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, right? We talked about it. Like, I've recently been buying investment properties with other people just because things are expensive, and it's a good way. I mean, there's a whole different topic there, but good way to kind of split the risk and things like that. And I know you've been having some conversations in that regard. What have you found like that resonates with people? Is it a common thing that comes up? Is this whole idea of co-buying? Um, and we're talking outside of two spouses buying together. I mean, that,
Yeah.
that
Right.
obviously that,
Right.
that obviously happens all the time. But somebody buying, and it also could be like with a parent, right? Co-buying could be with a parent too. So that's not atypical. I've seen gifts, but I've also seen a somebody buying with their father or something like that too.
Mm-hmm.
So are you having more and more of those conversations as of late? Like, what's been kind of the landscape for you?
Yeah. I think beyond and those who are lucky enough to have parents that are helping support potentially a first purchase, typically that just goes in the form of a part of a down payment as a gift, right? So the lender can calculate that fine. It has no hit to your availability to purchase or anything like that. It doesn't screw with any numbers that way. It's just a very beneficial thing if you have it, and you should be grateful if you do. That is assisted. So that was the thing we had seen in the past. I've had um, friends, and I've used their kind of formula to help some other people in the past. That if you're getting started and you're early on, and you know that you're going to be in a neighborhood maybe 3 to 5 years, um, can you afford to, instead of renting a 2 bedroom out with your friend or 3 bedroom out with your friend, tie the funds together and purchase something? Would that make more sense? Then that gets you, as we've talked about many times, it gets you in the game,
Right.
right? It gets you in the real estate game. You get to start to realize the rise in equity. Yes, some of that payment is going to interest, but it's not fully going to somebody else's rent that you have no way of recuperating in any way at the sale. So what have I been seeing lately? Well, one is that there is a whole Boston government program dedicated to this. So you know that there is enough interest in the co-buying space, and that has to do with multifamily properties. I think that when um, you know there is wishful thinking sometimes on the ability to get people money for a part of a down payment if they're co-buying as their first property, and where those things can actually happen. Like if you go FHA on some places that are very competitive, you might not have a shot
Right.
versus somebody who has a sturdy down payment and is competing directly against you. All right. It's not like you're not purposely going away from that party, but as the competition grows, you need to be stronger and
Right.
able to do that. So
Right.
there is a government program right now, Mayor Wu instituted, uh, you know, having to do with income levels. You get assistance in the down payment there. At favorable loans, partial pieces of your closing costs covered and all of that. And so I have to delve further into that program. But it's been something that I've been saying for a long time in places that are very clearly Southeast Dorchester, East Boston, Quincy, places where people will have multiple. Yo, thanks, Matt. Good to see you, man. Matt's our guy in New Hampshire, so he's riding the
Nice.
roller coaster with
Awesome.
with me right now. And uh, Yeah, so the places where you're inevitably going to have multiple roommates and rent in that space, does it make financial sense for you to buy with friends? And that's something that you've been doing consistently. And what I'd like to get into and hear your thoughts on uh, are setting up parameters, because you're kind of like getting a prenup, right? Of
Yeah.
when you're buying together, you want to make sure that the end goal is the same, or if things change, that there are predetermined outcomes
Hmm.
for what people want to do.
Yeah. And I think so. I'll get into that in just a second. One point I wanted to make was that like this whole concept of co-buying, I think, especially when you're first trying to get into the game, as Mike said, it's particularly relevant to Greater Boston
Mm-hmm.
because it's such a hard market to get into, given price points, and now obviously with interest rates still being pretty high, your monthly payments are high. I mean, it's not easy, right? So that's why it's a worthwhile tactic, strategy, whatever you want to call it, to consider, regardless of who you're co-buying with. Now,
Mm-hmm.
let's get into like the logistics and the process and what have you. Um, I say this anytime I talk about real estate, like real estate investing. You have to treat it like a business. You have to treat it like your business. Each purchase is a business. Each person purchase is its own entity. If you're buying with somebody else, don't just buy. Like, put together the proper documentation, for God's sake. Like you want to make sure you have a partnership agreement in place. If an LLC makes sense, create the LLC. Talk about these things. It's super important to actually communicate well with each other. If you're not able to communicate well with each other, it's not going to work. That's simple, right? But going through the process, paying somebody to put together a partnership agreement, file the LLC paperwork if that makes sense, create a bank account for your particular for
Mm-hmm.
that particular property, or your entity, whatever it happens to be. There's a lot of different ways to splice it and dice it, but all this to say, do it the right way. Don't be lazy about it, right? Like if
Yeah,
you're
question
partnering, go ahead.
question for you. When you're, so this is different than people intending to live there for some amount of time, right? You've never really done that with it. These have been primarily investment properties that you and a partner have
In
bought.
my case, yes. In my case, yes. But even if you're, I would, I would say even if you're co-buying or co-investing with somebody else who's not your spouse, you still should do that.
Exactly. Exactly. I
You
was going
still should do
to
that.
ask what parameters you have versus somebody that might be living there, but still, like when you're going to do repairs and upgrades, and when some person wants out, what happens? Those are my
Yeah, so like
questions.
those types of the outs are, you know, need to be clearly spelled out. Like one key thing that myself and my business partner for uh, the stuff that we own in Texas, uh, one key thing is like, look, if somebody wants out, the first right is to the other partner to buy out their portion, right? And to get a third party to review what the value is uh, of those you know those shares, so to speak,
Hmm.
or that share. Uh, that partnership's easy because it's 50-50, right? So it's
Yeah.
pretty easy to kind of figure out everything, right? Uh, I'm working on excuse me. I'm working
It's
on
dude.
another. It's still lingering, dude.
Yeah.
I'm working on a partnership right now where it's not going to be 50-50. There's going to be four partners, and you know, one person's 30%, one person's 50%, another person's 5%, or sorry, maybe a little bit more than that, and then somebody else is like 12%, right? So that dynamic is quite different, and it needs to be treated that way, and because every partnership, every business is different. So, Jason, what's up, man? Thanks for joining. Um, uh, but uh, but yeah, so I think like that's the key is regardless of whether it's, you know, owner occupied, whether it's an investment property, multifamily, condo, single family, one partner, four partners, it doesn't matter. Put together the right paperwork for as if it's an actual business, because guess what? It is. That's
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah. Um, I commend. There's a company called Paradigm that I've been friends with the guy who started it for a little bit now, and they just had a. I commend it trying for the idea. What they were trying to do was like, I'm interested in purchasing or investing in a property in X city, and if other people had submitted that, they would try to pair you up. So investing with two people with somebody that you don't know is like
I mean, look,
that's a
there are
large
ways
hurdle to get over.
there are ways you can do that. Like, you know, there are REITs and there are syndications and things like that. You can do that, but what you're talking about is like, oh, find somebody else who wants to buy, now pair up and figure out how to be partners. That's a tall task.
That is a tall task. It is.
That's a
There
tall
should be
task.
some familiarity with how a person operates in a business sense and what you both want out of it. And the more clarity and communication is done ahead of time, the less problems that you have
Yeah.
later on.
And I will say this too. On the flip side, like, just because someone's your best friend doesn't
Yes.
mean you should partner with them,
Yeah.
right? Just because someone is family doesn't mean you should partner with them. Like, there's, again, the business comes first. You really have to align on some values and on a vision and on like a process and things like that. And if that's not there, then that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. Yeah. That's like the typical you're sitting around like, I've got a great business idea. And it's like, oh, I would join in on that with you or whatever. And the emotional excitement kind of like
Yeah,
takes the
yeah,
wheel.
man. I mean, like, look, it can easily destroy a friendship,
Hmm.
friendship of some kind. It could easily destroy you know, some sort of like, you know, family relationship. Like, these things happen because it's not treated the right way. Like, you need to have multiple conversations. You need to go down the right channels to set up the foundation for it to be a success. So buying a property is not is it's not like it's not like anything else because there's things that will come up. There's things
Yep.
that there's decisions that need to be made. And I think whether you're co-buying, co-investing, regardless of what the situation is, again, just treat it the right way and give it the respect it deserves.
Hmm. And I think this time right now in the conversations we've had of the condo market is a little soft right now, like just bluntly, like there are some deals to be had if you figure out that the person who is selling it, one, has possessed it forever. So right, like the difference of 1 or 2% isn't that much of a hit to them if they're making, you know, 3x what they paid for it originally. And also the people that are tied to personal constraints of needing to move or, you know, needing to sell that to buy something else. The time constraint of that does influence people's ability to make decisions. There's sellers that maybe have tenants in it that don't really care, and they're like, well, I'll just rent it for another year if I can't get my price. But there's other situations where that's not the case. And so if you are coming new and you're like, in your 20s and you're coming to the city and ready to go, and if there's enough kind of scrounged up that you could put a down payment on with your friend or two friends, instead of renting something out, that's the beginning of, like I said, that game that you could continue
It's
on.
a
And
huge opportunity. It's a huge
yeah,
opportunity. It's obviously a risk, but everything is a risk. So like,
everything is risk.
but on the it's a risk in one way, in the sense that, oh, you're like, you're going in with some other people you've never done business with, and you're buying real estate together, and now you're kind of like, attached at the hip, so to speak. But on the flip side, you're splitting the risk,
Yeah.
right? Like, so that's a good thing too. So I mean, Greater Boston real estate, I mean, how much risk really is there? Right? But like,
Right.
but still you are splitting the risk, you're splitting the cost, you're splitting the expenses, you're splitting the exposure, all that kind of stuff. And I think that's a really key consideration. And that's
Mm.
kind of what I'm doing right now. Trying to, this next deal that I'm working on is splitting the risk with three other people to buy, a nice piece of property. But it's that me alone, it would be a tall task. It'd be a lot for me to do on my own. But finding a few people who are like-minded, get the vision, understand what's going on, have some capital to put up, um, you know, like understand what the objectives are, and all that kind of stuff, then that could be, could that be kind of like a nice little partnership, budding partnership. Who knows what it could lead to later on?
Yeah. Yeah. That's wonderful. When you are looking with other folks, maybe for people listening or watching, do you want to go into like cap rate or what numbers you're using to try to figure out what is a reasonable purchase price versus your desired outcome for rental income?
Yeah, I mean, so rental income, like, obviously, that's ultimately that comes down to uh, the rental income ultimately doesn't really matter as much as the cash flow, right? So what your expenses are, right? You want to make sure, very simple. You want to make sure the money that's coming in exceeds the money that's going out,
Hmm.
right? Now, the way that doesn't matter as much, right? Or you can probably give up some of that delta, is if you're getting a really good deal. Like,
Hmm.
if you feel like there's equity from day one, and you understand that it's an equity play versus a cash flow one, which, by the way, and that's a really important consideration, because usually it's one or the other, right?
Right. That's what, yeah.
hard
Yeah. Great point.
it's hard for something to be really good for you day one equity wise, and also go gangbusters cash flow wise. It's very hard to find both of those kind of aligning, right? So but if the cash flow is not that great, but it's an amazing property, great location, it's always going to be rented, the rent's high, usually the cost is going to be high in that situation as well.
Hmm.
So 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 like, that cash flow matters, but the context matters a lot more, right? So the cash flow against what is the equity from day one? Are we getting a good deal? If the cap rate is low, that's not a bad thing. But what is the context? Like, if that means you're going to have really good tenants, it's going to have basically a 0% vacancy rate, almost zero cost, uh, easy to manage,
Hmm.
um, maybe no property management cost. Well, maybe that's something to consider, if everybody is aligned, and the goals kind of line up. But if not, if the cap rate's really high and the cost is really high and all that kind of stuff, maybe you always have to ask yourself why. So
Yeah.
cap rate is it's an overused, I think, um, uh, metric, right? And a lot of people just think, oh, a high cap rate's just great.
Hmm.
That's not true. Like, there's oftentimes there's a reason a cap rate is high, and the reason usually is because you have higher vacancy rates, you have tougher tenants, um, you know all that kind of stuff. So context matters, and the biggest piece of context is location. So if you're trying to buy with somebody, you're trying to kind of like figure out what the game plan is and all that kind of stuff. It's really important to align on what on taking all those bits and pieces together to formulate a vision
Mm.
for what your business is striving for. Because if you're not aligned on what the goals are, if one person wants cash flow and one person's excited about equity, that's not going to work. That's not going to work,
And
right? So
you've approached each project differently, or
uh,
each purchase, or has it
each
been a
each
similar
each
philosophy?
partnership basically. So like myself and my partner who buy in Texas, the goal is cash flow. Like like yeah, we want a good deal, but like a deal is kind of like a crapshoot down there.
Hmm.
Like you don't really know what the appraisals are going to be. You don't really know how much it's going to appreciate. It's much more volatile, and we know that. Our goal is just like, okay, let's try to get full occupancy, and we know that if it's at full occupancy, the cash flow is really really good,
Yeah.
right? Whereas around here, right, like it's hard to accomplish that because the prices are so high. So
Hmm.
so the vision for the partnership here, for the unit I'm looking at right now, is very different than for the stuff down in Texas. So that's what I mean.
Hmm.
Treat every partnership differently. Treat it like a business, and have those tough conversations oftentimes to make sure the vision is to make sure things are aligned. Um, so
Wise
Saman asked a
words.
good
Yeah.
question. He asked thoughts on short-term and long-term rentals, and he's absolutely right. Unicorns are not real. There's no unicorn in real estate, none. Right? Like you'll never find awesome cash flow, awesome location, awesome appreciation potential, great deal. Like no, none of all that you'll never hit on. You just have to find the right.
A major crime probably would have had to be committed there.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Most
Like
likely.
Mike was there. Mike was there. Look
Yeah.
at this plastered on the walls. Mike was there in blood.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You
Uh,
guys have your black light? Yeah, yeah, you can kind of read it. Yeah.
um, but in terms of short term and long term rentals, I mean, I'm a long term rental guy because like I like steady Eddie.
Yep.
I like predictable, like forecastable type of investments. Um, Short-term rentals, I mean, look, obviously it's quite seasonal oftentimes, right? And you have much more wear and tear on your property. You have a lot more maintenance
Yep.
costs, things like that. And for some people, I mean, some people have built amazing businesses off of short-term rentals, right? So if that's your flavor, okay, like that's great, right? But put together a game plan, and if you're going to partner with people, make sure they're aligned with it, right?
Yeah.
So, but
That's
there are
it's going to
pros and
consume a
cons
lot
to
more of your
everything.
time
They're
too.
definitely going to take, and you better believe you're going to need property management,
Yep.
right? Whereas with long-term rentals, you may not,
Hmm.
depending on where they are in relation to you. So I think just like with anything, there's pros and cons to either side of the coin, and same thing goes with short-term and long-term rentals. One thing with long-term rentals is that like you sign a lease, you're stuck with that tenant for 12 months,
Hmm.
right? You're not gonna. It's not gonna be easy to kick them out. You better believe. You better make sure you do like lots of vetting of your tenants. Make sure they're the right folks. All that kind of stuff. So and oftentimes on a per month basis, you're making less money, right?
Yes.
So
Right.
so you have to kind of just like weigh those pros and cons and what makes sense for you as an investor. So.
Hmm.
Um, so anyways yeah, I think like no matter what the partnership, the type of asset class, the location, what have you, it's important to be thoughtful. It's important to be thoughtful. It's important to have those tough conversations because they are tough. I mean, we're talking about big money, right? Like these are not easy conversations, and it's okay to be like, hey, actually, you know what? This is not going to work. Like we're
Hmm.
friends, no hard feelings. We're family, no hard feelings. But this is not the right fit.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that's all you have to say. Very like people sometimes are afraid to speak the truth like that. Sometimes, oh, I don't want. Well, guess what? Not hurting someone's feelings gets you a shit ton of headaches later down later
Yeah,
on.
man. Like I mean, like you in business, like I mean, because this is what this is. It is business, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to have those tough conversations. If you just like If you're just like, oh, that's my friend, like, I don't want to offend him and blah, 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 like having that mindset is going to create insane amounts of headache. So,
Hmm.
so I think that's kind of the highlight is if you're trying to go down this co-buying, co-investing path, you're trying to get in the game, you need some help, make sure you're partnering with the right people. And right people, and doesn't mean the smartest person in the room, doesn't mean the person you like the most. It means the person or people that align with you the best.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and that might
Agreed.
take some time to figure that out.
True that. And one last thing I would just because I had one of these situations where a friend like approached me and it was just like because I get the niche, right? It's just like the multifamilies near an airport, these traveling like the stewardesses and the pilots need places to lay their head. This is a big opportunity. And like it was one of those like drunk dinner conversations where at the end you're like, yeah, this makes all the sense in the world. And then the next day you're just like, no, that would that would be crazy. But
Yeah,
so
like honestly, you hear that a lot, right? Like, I mean, the one thing to keep in mind is when you hear people talk, like everybody and their mom, and especially those people who probably have no idea what they're talking about certain things, like for example, catering to traveling nurses and things like that.
yeah.
That's probably a pocket that you want to stay away from.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So just kind of word of advice for anybody listening. But
Exactly.
any last thoughts, Mike?
I mean, and just now's the it's wild out there, but deals are there to be
Yeah,
had. So
yeah,
it's the adage of people are on the sidelines a little bit right now because the overall economic outlet is a little bit uncertain. So now's the time to start making it know what you want, one, and two, if it's a deal then go seize it, because a couple of years from now, just like every other time stuff like this has happened, a couple of years later you kick yourself for not
yeah.
doing it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And just on the topic as a whole, just as a reminder, find that opportunity. If you need help seizing that opportunity, just be thoughtful about who you're partnering with. I'm sure you can find the right person, but don't let it be just the first person you talk to,
Mm-hmm.
right? And maybe it is the first person you talk to, right? But be thoughtful about it. Like
Mm-hmm.
like really have a conversation about goals, about vision, all that kind of stuff. And like I said, ask the tough questions. Let them ask you tough questions, right? That's part of the process. So he's Mike. I'm
Well
Saad.
put.
This is Story Time. We're back next week. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Yeah, thanks everybody, dude. I tried to make a can of soup. Did you try to see can of soup today?
I did, like I was trying to do like high fives between you and me, and the
That's what I
hands were
was
like.
trying to do too. But it was like we were like 90th in the queue or something. Were you getting that message where it just wouldn't make
It was
anything?
like, but that was definitely wrong because quickly it would change. But like, yeah, very glitchy,
Yeah,
very glitchy.
yeah.
But
Can of soup, get your act together.
get it together,
We have a
people. You heard
brand
it
to
here first. Story
uphold.
time. Let's go.
All right,
All right,
Sad.
all right. See you later, bud.
Good work. Later, bro.